Hi, this is the Tropical Tidbit for Saturday evening, September 19th. As always, the thoughts here are mine alone, and in making decisions, consult the National Hurricane Center and your local weather office for the best information. We continue to have several storms in the Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Wilfred down in the central Atlantic, expected to dissipate over the next few days as it moves slowly west-northwestward, as it is experiencing a lot of wind shear, in part due to the outflow from Hurricane Teddy pushing down from the northwest, and this is not expected to be a threat to land. We also have the remnants of ex-Hurricane Paulette, which ceased to be a tropical storm several days ago, but its remnants are now diving back down to the south, and this may develop again into a tropical cyclone as it starts to redevelop thunderstorm activity near its center, possibly bringing some active weather to the Azores, but not expected to be a significant threat to land as it moves generally like this over the next few days. And we, of course, have Hurricane Teddy, which I'm going to save for the second half of the video, and Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf of Mexico, which is where we are going to start the analysis today. This is the close-up view of the storm, showing the circulation somewhere in here underneath this little puff of thunderstorms, and the circulation has come up a little bit farther to the north today than most models expected yesterday. It is now stalled out and has ceased moving northward, but has gotten close enough to Louisiana that we are getting some heavy rain spreading in to the southern portion of the state, and we also have some strong southerly wind coming up on this east side, which could push a little bit of ocean water into flood-prone areas, and storm surge values of 1 to 3 feet are possible in this part of the central Gulf Coast. What we're now expecting is for Beta to start drifting toward the west here, in general toward the central Texas coastline, and it's unlikely to strengthen significantly during its transit across the western Gulf, as we do have a lot of dry air starting to wrap around the center of circulation, and we're starting to see that choke off some of the thunderstorms in the center, which have been more sporadic today. Now, part of that's been due to a little bit of wind shear that we've had. We have an upper-level trough over Louisiana, bringing a lot of southwesterly flow aloft that has been shearing Beta a little bit over the last 24 hours or so. This trough is about to move on to the east, and shear will decrease, although not disappear, as Beta moves toward Texas. But you can see the abundant mass of dark gray over Texas in the western Gulf, where some of this dry air is now getting wrapped into Beta's circulation, as I noted. And this is likely to remain a feature in the environment of Beta as it moves toward Texas, and the supply of dry air around the storm is likely to be a permanent feature of the rest of the storm's lifetime. This is the GFS upper-level wind forecast showing the upper-level trough near the Texas-Louisiana border this morning that was bringing some southwesterly flow over the storm, again imparting some of that shear. And this trough is now moving on to the east, so we'll see it exit, and we're left with much lighter flow over the storm by tonight and tomorrow, although it is still out of the westerly direction. So with the low-level flow directing the storm toward the coast and light westerly flow aloft, there is still some shear here, maybe 10 or 15 knots of it. And that shear can be important because as long as there is some shear, it increases the odds of the dry air near Beta getting ingested into the storm center. And we can see some of that dry air here on the GFS getting into the circulation already on the model. The green is the moisture here, and you can see the dry air in brown wrapping in and actually getting right into the storm's core. And that's likely to happen at least periodically over the next couple of days. And as the storm nears the Texas coast, we're likely to see this pulsing of thunderstorm activity near the center, where sometimes we get a little ball of moisture and convection, and then more dry air is available to wrap in and disrupt it repetitively. And so we may see a few bursts of mild intensification and then some weakening, and maybe we rinse and repeat a couple of times before this gets to the Gulf Coast. But the moral of the story is that this source of dry air here is not going away, and it's likely that Beta will continue to be limited by the proximity of this dry air through the remainder of its journey across the Gulf. Now, as far as the steering goes, we noted that the storm has come a little bit farther north today than was expected. Most models only expected yesterday for it to get up about this far, but we have it a little bit farther north. And as we look at what this does to the forecast going forward, we have this trough leaving with a big cold front through here over Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And now you can see a ridge over Texas and Oklahoma that is beginning to build eastward to the north of Beta. This is going to start inducing a steering flow around the ridge out of the easterly direction so that we get to, Sunday. Now we have the ridge due north of the storm, and this is going to start pushing beta westward or west-northwestward toward the Texas Gulf Coast. Now, since the storm has gotten a little bit farther north, it's going to be pushed by this ridge at a more northerly latitude than before. So while yesterday's forecasts had it more toward the Corpus Christi area, today's forecasts have it more toward the Matagorda Bay area, plus or minus 100 miles or so up and down the coast from there. So now targeting a little bit more of the central Gulf Coast of Texas, or the central Texas coast, compared to yesterday. Now you'll see that this gets toward the coast sometime on Monday. On this model forecast, this ridge does eventually move off toward the east, and we start to open up a little bit more of a southeasterly flow that tries to push this inland over southeast Texas. We talked yesterday about how a lot of the uncertainty with beta's forecast involves whether or not it actually pushes inland and weakens, or stays just near the coast or over water and is able to remain a strong storm for longer, potentially turning northeastward. Since the storm is farther north today, it's important to note that it may increase the odds of this actually getting inland and weakening over Texas, because we're now closer to the ridge axis, farther away from the axis of weak steering flow over the Rio Grande. If the storm was closer to this axis of weak flow like it was on yesterday's forecasts, it's much easier for it to stall out here. If it's now a little bit farther north, perhaps we'll actually see this push inland here, because there's a little bit more southeasterly flow on the flank of this ridge over the southern part of the country. And so there is a little more probability in the model guidance we have today for a track that actually gets inland. This would still mean a lot of rain for Texas, but perhaps less up near Houston and the southwest Louisiana area, because the storm will likely now have to weaken if it goes inland before turning to the northeast, because we are expecting a little bit more troughiness over Oklahoma to move in and perhaps try to turn this toward the right, whether it's over land or water, by the time we get into Tuesday. So if we look at the current model track guidance, you'll see that there is still some sensitivity here to the exact intensity of beta and its steering over the next couple of days, because a sheared storm is always a little bit hard to predict. So we do see a little bit of spread, but generally a track toward the west-northwest as we described, and then a lot of models are getting it inland now, as I stated, but there are a couple that still try to keep it just offshore, so that is still technically possible here, and we can't guarantee whether it will be over land or water on Monday and Tuesday, but it is expected to be close to the coast regardless, certainly close enough to bring storm impacts to the central and upper Texas Gulf Coast. And given this northeastward turn that's currently forecast, we're likely to see impacts that are spread all the way up the Texas coast and potentially into still Louisiana. And we're already getting impacts to Louisiana as it stands. Remember, we are getting rain in here already. So a wide swath of the Gulf Coast likely to see rain and gusty winds from this. This is the NHC forecast currently showing basically that kind of track there, just inland of the coast now on the forecast, not quite getting to hurricane intensity here, and then turning to the northeast on Tuesday, and by Thursday it's decaying over Louisiana. We have warnings over a large swath of coastline with a tropical storm warning from Corpus Christi to the central part of Louisiana, and a hurricane watch from Corpus Christi to Galveston. And this hurricane watch is there primarily because if beta happens to form a convective core that at least temporarily insulates itself from the dry air around it, then it may be able to briefly have one of those bursts of intensification that nudges the wind up 10 or 20 miles per hour. And then if you get winds up to 75 miles per hour, it would be a hurricane at landfall, hence the hurricane watch. Right now, we're expecting winds a little bit lower than that. So the official forecast doesn't have it as a hurricane, but this hurricane watch reflects the potential that at the worst case scenario, it could have winds up there near 75 miles per hour. So that's the watch right now. Currently, it has winds of 60, likely to stay pretty close to that over the next couple of days. We're not expecting any wild intensification or wild weakening for that matter. So certainly tropical storm conditions, though, in blue expected. That's winds over 40. So windy, but not crazy. And the bigger problem here may be some rainfall that could cause some flash flooding issues, as the storm will be moving slowly, going from Monday to Wednesday, not moving very far. And so a lot of water is expected to come down, with potentially over 6 inches in everything that's under the orange contour here. Orange, red, and purple, all over 6 inches of rain, could cause flash flooding issues near the Texas and Louisiana coastlines. Again, very broad area here. Even if the storm is near the Texas coastline, Louisiana getting perhaps some flooding threats from this, including from the ocean side, where this storm surge graphic shows a wide swath of a few feet of ocean rise over normally dry ground, with 2 to 4 feet along the Texas and southwest Louisiana coastlines, and then lower values in South Texas and eastern Louisiana, but still a few feet of water rise could lead to some flooding in flood-prone areas. So wide swath of impacts here. We'll keep an eye on this over the next couple of days, as it is a slow mover and likely to be a bit of a pain for a few days yet, well into next week. Okay, we're going to move back out to the main view here and talk about Hurricane Teddy, which is currently located southeast of Bermuda and slowly making its way toward the north. This is a lumbering large hurricane, and we can see on the infrared loop here just how large it has become, with a very large eye developing. And what has happened since yesterday is that the large band that I showed you seems to be wrapping all the way around now and trying to form a secondary eye wall and cause the inner eye wall to decay. And if we look at a microwave pass from earlier this afternoon, you'll kind of see that, where we have a very large eye now compared to yesterday, as that band has wrapped around. And we've basically seen an eye wall replacement cycle here for the storm. And as I mentioned yesterday, what this normally entails is that the storm's maximum winds tend to come down a little bit. Teddy's winds are down to 120 as estimated by NHC. They might be a little lower than that. We'll see when the recon plane gets in there just how strong they are, but still a powerful hurricane with winds over 100 miles an hour for sure. But that wind field does get broader as well. So Teddy is getting even larger. It was already large, getting larger again, and likely to see at least still some impacts in Bermuda on this kind of forecast track that most models agree on now. There's the island of Bermuda. The storm is expected to pass well east of the island, but given just how big the storm is, we could still see tropical storm conditions in Bermuda with winds over 40 miles per hour at that location out of the north on the storm's west side. So still potential for impacts there, but fortunately not a direct hit. Still, though, expecting a track very close to southeastern Canada, which could get a direct hit from Teddy, with most models now agreeing on a close approach to eastern Nova Scotia and then over Newfoundland as it interacts with that cutoff upper low that we've been mentioning over the last few days and then turns northeastward. Now, there's still a little bit of uncertainty as to how much wind Teddy will be packing when it gets near Canada, because as it swings toward the left here, that's when it's interacting with the upper level low to its southwest. And then when it is released by that low and turns northeast, during this turn right in here, it may slow down just for a brief time. And remember that the water gets quite cold north of the Gulf Stream, which runs right around this line. So the water here is quite cold, and as soon as Teddy moves over this, it's likely to weaken rather quickly. And the whole key is how much time does it have from this line to the coast. If it takes over a day to get there, then it may have much less wind than it had before crossing that line. If it's quicker to get to the coast, it'll have more wind. So right now, Nova Scotia gets hit pretty quick after it crosses this line, and Nova Scotia is likely to get a lot of wind from Teddy, as it is still expected to be a strong post-tropical cyclone by the time it gets there. Not tropical, but still a powerful non-tropical cyclone. By the time this gets to Newfoundland, more time will have passed, and so Newfoundland is likely to see less wind, though still significant. Perhaps not hurricane force in Newfoundland compared to Nova Scotia, which will likely get hurricane force wind, but still significant event for southeast Canada. This is the forecast track from NHC, showing that same kind of path as most of the modeling has now bend toward the left, then a bend toward the right. Again, just to the east of Bermuda, which has a tropical storm warning in blue, given that the storm does have a large wind field. You can see that in orange here. So if you translate the X up to about here on the forecast track, you can see the orange region may still intersect the island of Bermuda, bringing tropical storm force winds there as the storm passes off to the east. And again, significant impacts from wind and storm surge at the coastline are likely in Canada, with hurricane force winds still possible with this non-tropical storm once it gets to Nova Scotia. Weaker winds in Newfoundland, though still over tropical storm force, do seem likely on this forecast. So significant severe weather event for Canada, less so for Bermuda. We'll continue to track this over the next few days. Be safe in both of those regions. That's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching.